On this dissection of the cat, one can trace the structures of the digestive system. Once food is swallowed, food passes from the oropharynx to the laryngopharynx. Now, since food and air share this pathway, note that the larynx has an elastic piece of cartilage, the epiglottis, which closes over the opening to the larynx, the glottis, so that a bolus of food cannot enter the airway. The trachea is the anterior passageway through the throat, and so one can see these cartilage rings, which the trachea has, but not the esophagus, and the trachea is the anterior structure. If one were to remove the trachea, then one would see the posterior tube, the esophagus. And so there are two tubes in the throat which are kept separate. The anterior tube is the airway, the trachea. The esophagus then passes behind the heart and lungs, and then will pass through the diaphragm and then enter the abdominal pelvic cavity. All right. Now, in the abdominal pelvic cavity, one notices that these digestive structures are covered by serous membranes, just as the heart and lungs were covered by the pericardium and pleura, respectively. The serous membrane which covers these organs is known as the peritoneum. There is a parietal peritoneum. This makes up the wall of the abdominal pelvic body cavity. And the organs themselves are covered by a visceral peritoneum. And because we have these two smooth layers and a lubricating peritoneal fluid in the peritoneal cavity between them, then these structures can move. Digestive structures can move relative to each other and the body wall without blisters and adhesions. Now, in addition to these two layers of the peritoneum, there are also then extensions of these layers. So coming from the greater curvature of the stomach, not only do we have the visceral peritoneum, but then also this greater omentum, often known as the fatty apron, which extends from it. Off of the lesser curvature of the stomach, there is a lesser omentum. Between the lobes of the liver, there is a falciform ligament, which separates these lobes and then anchors the liver to the body wall. Between the folds of the small intestine, these loops, we can see the mesentery, right? And then anchoring the large intestine, we can observe the mesocolon. So in addition to the serosa layer of the visceral peritoneum, there are also then extensions of these which help to anchor these digestive organs. The stomach is J-shaped. If one were to cut the stomach, one would see folds known as rugae. And the stomach then empties into the small intestine. The first region of the small intestine, the duodenum or duodenum, is the shortest. Here there are a number of glands, not only for digestive enzymes, but also to neutralize stomach acid. From there, the small intestine is known as the jejunum, and then it is the final portion, the ileum, which is not only the largest, but also then empties into the large intestine. So this would then be the ileum emptying into the large intestine here. All of these three regions look the same macroscopically, but they would vary microscopically. For example, there would be more Peyer's patches, those regions of the immune system in the ileum, but not in the other sections. There are glands present in the duodenum, which are not present in the other sections. Not only does the stomach empty into the duodenum in this region, but so too do some of the accessory structures. Here we can see the liver, the body's second largest organ after the skin. It is divided into a number of lobes, and the gallbladder is inferior to the right lobe. If one were to look at the underside of the liver, one could make out the bile ducts, and the common bile duct emptying into the small intestine would be the most visible. Also, the pancreas is an accessory structure. Food does not go through the pancreas, the liver, the gallbladder, but rather their secretions help with the process of digestion. So here you can see the very thin pancreas as it hugs the small intestine. If you were studying structures to identify, and you were asked to say identify something on the right side, you might just make a mental note that this would be an easy place to ask the pancreas. And then also you can see then two tubes in this region, in addition to the green common bile duct, which is bringing bile from the liver and gallbladder into the small intestine. We see this brown tube. This is a blood vessel, the hepatic portal vein. Now, in this cat, some of the blood vessels are red and blue because they were injected with red and blue latex. But because this is a portal vein, a vein that has capillaries on either side, then the latex could not reach this, and that's why you see the brown color, which is just the remains of coagulated blood. The hepatic portal vein is going to collect the deoxygenated blood with remains of the meal and then take it to the liver for processing there. And so, on a quiz, if you were to see structures identified on the right side, you might be careful, to note, is this the gallbladder, the pancreas, the hepatic portal vein, or the common bile duct? In contrast, if you were asked to identify something and you noticed that it was on the left side, this is the best place to identify those unpaired arteries which bring oxygenated blood to the digestive tract. So here we can see two large unpaired arteries. The second inferior one, this is known as the superior mesenteric artery, and this is giving rise to the arteries which we see here in the mesentery, servicing the folds of the small intestine there. And superior to that, we have the large celiac trunk. Now this is unpaired, as is the superior mesenteric artery. Unlike many regions where you say have a left and right brachial artery, you only have one of each of those. So here you can see the unpaired celiac trunk. The celiac trunk then trifurcates. It divides into three branches. The first branch, the most difficult to see here, is the hepatic artery going off towards the liver. There is the left gastric artery going to the stomach, and then the splenic artery going here to the spleen. And so from this celiac trunk, we then see three branches: the hepatic, the gastric, and the splenic. Now, the stomach is such a large organ that there are actually branches off of both the splenic and the hepatic arteries, which should also reach regions of the stomach.